who have stood up against the brutal rape and murder of the young doctor in Kolkata. I want to remember the young doctor as a symbol of resistance and courage. She did not survive, but in many ways she is a survivor, because in her name I think thousands of people have come together to raise their voice against systemic sexual violence. So I want to begin by saluting her and the protests that have built up around that incident. I was looking at the title, and I think in many ways possibly I was just talking about Agnima, and I was just talking about how we would do this, and we also want to raise broader questions. So I was looking at the title, Women in the Workplace, Subverting Stereotypes, Negotiating Security, and I thought that we talk a little bit about each of the terms in this title that we need to unpack. First, of course, is workplace, women and workplace. And it's interesting that when we say workplace, we are thinking of some kind of place where apparently women work, but you don't think of the home as the workplace, right? When you say workplace, the assumption is workplace versus home, where there's no work that happens. So we need to, first of all, I think we need to unpack the idea of work. As we have done for decades. Nothing I'm going to say is widely. So we need to begin. So I was saying that nothing I'm going to say is widely original. I'm drawing on feminist scholarship and practice of decades. So let's think first about how work is defined. And what feminists have pointed out is that there is an assumed difference between the domain of production and the domain of reproduction. And production is seen as the space where, so production is the space where wages are paid for the work that you do. And reproduction is not considered work. It's feminists who have started, who insisted that reproduction is a sphere of work as well. By reproduction, we mean not just biological reproduction. We do mean biological reproduction. That is the actual production of new human beings. But by reproduction, we also mean the reproduction of labor power. So reproduction of labor, and that is laboring bodies, but also reproduction of labor power. Now, what do we mean by the reproduction of labor power? That people who have to go back to work the next day. They have to work today and then they have to go back to work the next day. And for their labor power to be reproduced, certain things have to be done at home. Food has to be cooked, children have to be looked after, water has to be brought from miles away. If you're, for most women in India, that is part of their routine work. They walk for miles to get water, they walk for miles to get firewood. So all of this work, which is done to maintain and reproduce labor power, is unpaid labor, zero wages. It's not considered as work, but it is this unwaged labor that lies at the basis of the sphere of production. Production could not take place if all this unpaid work was not carried out. Now, what happens is that once you take into account this sphere of reproduction as work, then several questions emerge. So there was a debate in the 70s among feminists in the West, but that debate was also carried out to some extent in India in the 80s. And that debate was about wages for housework. Should housework be paid wages? Right? Should women who do housework be paid wages? And the debate was in this way, that supposing we agree that women should be paid wages for housework, who pays the wages? Does the employer pay the wages? Because really the entire system is based on this unpaid wage labor. If this labor had to be paid for, the system would collapse, right? So if you insist on wages for labor, who pays? Does the employer pay? And if the employer pays, does the employer pay the woman who's doing the work directly? So that was a whole set of questions. Who pays? But the other possibility was that the husband would pay. The husband pays the wife. That raises a whole other set of questions. The husband becomes her employer. What are her rights? What? So the debate was very, very rich and very productive. But eventually, that idea changed. The idea of wages for housework is not really made by feminists so much anymore, because we moved to thinking, what does it do when you do wages for housework? You are concretizing the sexual division of labor. You are assuming that women have to do this work and we'll pay them for it. So now you're even freed of any responsibility of thinking of it as work which other people have to do. So feminists actually would prefer to think of socialized reproductive work. In other words, employers should be compelled to have, for example, childcare facilities at every workplace, not just where they employ women, everywhere. Because if you're going to think of children as human resources, which unfortunately that's the language of governmentality, right? That people are human resources. So if you're going to take children as resources, then the state has a responsibility. So, and the employers have a responsibility. So let there be universal childcare. Let there be socialized ways of housework, community kitchens, right? Isn't that better than pushing the woman back into the private individual space of the family and letting her be paid a wage to keep doing the work that she's doing? So the feminist debate went into thinking about this in a different way, that we should really be thinking of breaking down this individualized, privatized sexual division of labor. And if we are thinking big, let's think along the lines of socialized reproductive services. I do want to take one small second. I intended to start with this. Since many of you are first semester students, you may wonder, I did realize that some of you are wondering, why are we holding these meetings in this weather, in this space, in this very shortcut kind of a way with this and that and the other. It's not shortcut, but you might wonder why we're doing it, although it's very beautiful, the weather is. So you should know, the first semester students should know, that we are not permitted to hold such events in the closed seminar rooms that we have in JNU. There is nothing dangerous about this talk. There is not this talk or any talk. There is not. What is dangerous is a critical thinking mind, and universities are the targets. Every university is the target of attack, because universities have been at the forefront of resistance for the last decade. So this is not an accident. We are not mad that we want to stand in this heat, and so I'm also very, very appreciative of the fact that whenever such talks are held, there are actually so many students. But this is the reason. I thought I should explain, because I realized that at least one or two people didn't understand why we are doing it like this. It's because there is no permission to hold any event anywhere in any of the facilities of JNU. All right. So coming back to the workplace. So we need to first of all problematize and rethink the idea of the term workplace, because that implies that the home is not a space of work. So we first of all open up that. I also want to point out that when you look at something like the work participation rate, when you look at work participation rate of the female workforce, if you look at ILO reports or any kind of report on work participation rates, you get kind of broadly around 30%, and then there's of 30% of the female population working. Now, this is the whole point, and this is what feminist economists have also been arguing about. How is work being defined when you're doing a census where you ask people, have you worked in the last 3 months? That's the kind of question that is asked. So if women have been doing housework, they tend to say no. Even if they have been working on their small farms, if it's their own farm, they tend to say no, because they were working on their own farm. So there's a way in which feminist economists have fought to include housework and to include this kind of work in the definition. So you see the arrangements that we are making. I mean, I haven't made, but look at the arrangements that are made to ensure that such things happen. This is what keeps JNU alive, folks. Okay, it's what keeps universities alive. Okay, so the very definition of work has had to be challenged by feminist economists, because otherwise it looks like a very small percentage of women actually work. And if you look at the reasons that are given in such reports for why there are declining work rate participation, they tend to give reasons like access to education. So when women go to be educated and they have access to higher education, they are not working. So it's a very strange, so it sounds like a negative thing, declining participation of women in the workforce, but if it's because they're going for higher education, that's a good thing, right? So there's a strangeness to the way in which work is calculated, work is understood, especially in the context of women, because a large part of what every woman does, of course you know, it's not a choice for women between being a housewife and being a housewife and a CEO, right? The choice is not that. The choice is, between being a housewife and a CEO, the choice is between being a CEO and a housewife or only a housewife. Because that's part of once as feminists, if we raise the question of work like this, we are opening up questions of caste, we're opening up questions of class privilege, because then what happens is women of caste and class privilege are able to see, but you see how automatically I said women are able to employ other women to do their work, but the work is not the woman's work. The work is the work of the family, but the employer is seen as the woman. So it's like the memsab and the maid, but actually it's the patriarchal class caste structure and the women who have to do this work for a wage and then go back and do that work without a wage in their own homes, right? So we need to open up the question of work. The second point, the second interesting or important word in this title is stereotypes in the workplace. And one stereotype which people like us would tend to have is when you think of workplace. So now for the moment I'm keep using the term workplace. Having put it under a question mark, I'm going to just use it because it's there in the title. But if you think of a workplace, you think of an office. You're not thinking of, you and me, people like us, are not thinking of workplace as fields, domestic work. You're thinking of the woman with her bag who just goes to an office. So then how do you open up the question of stereotypes, right? What are the stereotypes about construction workers? What are the stereotypes about farm workers? What are the stereotypes about women who are domestic servants? Not really any. So when you say stereotypes, I think that perhaps we are thinking only of the urban middle class woman who goes to an office and the stereotypes about her, because nobody is producing any stereotypes about working class women who are working continuously. So we need to break this. So when we say stereotypes of so-called working women, because the assumption is that other women aren't working, but the stereotype includes things like selfish, callous, thinking only about herself, doesn't care about the household, etc. So there are those kinds of stereotypes. I won't spend much time opening that up, because I just wanted to point out that such stereotypes are usually about urban middle class women who go to office, and there are assumptions of their sexual availability, etc. And the issue of sexual harassment at the workplace, which was brought into prominence by the Vishakha judgment of the Supreme Court, it pointed out that so you know that it came up in the context of Bhavri. Bhavri Devi was raped because she tried to stop a child marriage in her village. We take her name. We normally don't take the names of the rape survivors and rape victims, but Bhavri Devi is a proud symbol of feminist struggle against rape. So we take her name proudly. We take her name with honor. So if you look at those guidelines, those are about raising questions about different kinds of workplaces and how to combat sexual harassment there. And I won't, this may come up in the question, so I'm not sure, perhaps Arunima may address it, but there was a GS cache which came out of the Vishakha guidelines, and there's the ICC which came out of 2013 law, and there are many issues with the difference between, very briefly, between the GS Cash coming out of the Vishakha guidelines and the ICC. GS Cash is different forms of GS Cash in different universities. Is that GS Cash type of things were actually produced ground up. There were elected members, there were nominated members, there was a whole kind of democratic discussion about what the form of the sexual harassment committee should be in each university. So the body here didn't look exactly like the body in DU, it didn't look exactly like the body in NEHU, it took different forms. ICC is established by the employer. The employer nominates all the members. There is normally no space for election, but the employer can decide whether to give you election or not. And the control of the ICC is entirely in the hands of the employer, which is obviously very, very problematic in the cases of sexual harassment that go to ICC. So there have been now 10 years of ICCs functioning in different spaces. There are reports, and it shows that justice is hardly ever delivered. The third point is about security, and it says negotiating security. So security is actually a term also that we might want to question. Do as feminists, so when I'm like opening up the title like this, I don't mean it's not a good title. I think it's an excellent title because it helps us to think about all these terms. So when you think about security, is the goal of feminist politics security for women? Or is the goal of feminist politics protecting the agency and autonomy of women? They're two different things. Because security can mean the language of security implies certain Lakshman Rekhas, as it were, right? So the assumption is in the workplace you're not safe. But women are not safe in the house. Women are not safe in homes. There is rape and sexual abuse in homes. There is violence which is non-sexual in homes. There's marital rape. There is the insecurity of the economic dependence on the husband, because women are not trained to do anything but marriage. Middle class women are not trained for anything but marriage, and the pressure to get married starts very, very early. So this idea of security is again something we might want to open up. I'm expecting there'll be questions, so we can carry on later, also after Arunima finishes. So marriage as an institution, whether it is offering security at all, the idea is it offers you security, but in fact, it doesn't offer security to women. It's a patriarchal institution. There are very clear hierarchies. There are very clear expectations of what you're supposed to do in that marriage. So security is lacking for women at home and in the workplace. So we should rather be fighting not to get security, but to respect and honor our choices, our autonomy, our agency. That should be the goal. And I want to conclude with this point so it kind of goes back to what we began with, that there's a normalization of rape culture in this country. And by rape culture, I mean everything that happens, from the smallest comments and slogans comments and taunts that are made at women, a non-consensual, any kind of non-consensual action on your fellow student or by a faculty on a student. And of course, there are actually an average of 90 rapes a day. 90 rapes a day were reported in India in 2022. And these rapes are in the home. They're often, 90 are reported, but if the rapes are in the home, they're unlikely to be reported. So these are just the rapes by strangers. Tourists are routinely raped. We want to call ourselves Vishwaguru, but this is what happens to women tourists in this country, right? They face sexual violence, they face sexual harassment, they face rape. So there's a normalization of rape culture. There's a way in which rape and sexual violence is minimized. There's also a mystification of rape itself. So the overall physical violence and the other kinds of violence and intimidation that women face doesn't have the same weight as saying you've been raped or sexually assaulted. If a body is found here of a woman, God forbid, I don't believe in God, universe forbid, a body is found here of a woman anywhere in a public space, badly bruised and battered, the first question will be, was she raped? She may not have been raped. But the question will, because that then becomes the issue, in a way in which the general intimidation we all face and the general ways in which our choices are limited, I'm sure at least 25% of the women present here have fought with their parents to do an MA. At least 25. So have had to fight to say, I'm going to go do an MA and I'm going to go do it in JNU. Right? That's how much you've had to fight. So that's not violence, it's violence. If you've had to fight so much for a simple thing, so there's a certain patriarchal violence. So I'm going to put rape culture at the extreme end of the spectrum, but there's a certain patriarchal violence which we need to be alert to and aware of. And when we come back to rape itself, so 90 cases a day have been reported. And I do want to just conclude about rape by saying that the assumption seems to be we need tougher laws. We need another law apparently in the RG Kar case, right? We need a special law to protect doctors. Now, I think there is a way in which, and I realized, I've been realizing for a while, but in this instance, I realized that there's a way in which patients' families attack doctors if the patients don't survive, and that's really problematic. So there might be something that needs to be done to protect doctors in that sense. But we don't need more and tougher laws. We don't need the death sentence because, in fact, it's tougher laws and death sentence and so on which makes convictions so low. It's a very low rate of convictions, partly because when the judge thinks, and this is a worldwide phenomenon, feminists have argued against tougher laws and tougher punishments, and especially against death sentence for rape or for anything. Most of us are opposed to the death sentence in principle, because we realize that the death sentence was introduced in 2013 and has it stopped rapes, 90 rapes a day in 2022. It does not, tough laws do not act as a deterrent. When you go to court, judges then feel, if I have to send this man to jail for life or to sentence him to death, I have to have incontrovertible proof. And you're never going to have incontrovertible proof of sexual violence. Nobody is going to keep 5 witnesses to what you do with the sexual violence. So that's one reason. But the other reason why conviction rate is low is because either deliberately or because of carelessness, the actual investigation of rape cases is very lackadaisical. Evidence is not collected properly. The investigation is not carried out with any sense of. It's very shoddy. The investigation is very shoddy. So there's a low rate of conviction. And what we need is not tougher laws. And this is what all feminists say, what we need is the certainty of punishment. If you do this, if you show that 5 people have actually got the punishment, even if the punishment is 2 years in jail, or suspension for a semester if it's a student law, it may be a very so-called mild punishment. But a certainty, but that depends on the act, the exact act of sexual violence. The point is that certainty of punishment is what deters rape. The prevailing impunity, especially over the last 10 years, the prevailing impunity of public violence, lynching, mob violence, and stripping of women, all this, the way in which it has exploded in the last 10 years, this is because of impunity, and impunity, that is the confidence that there will be no punishment. That is what we have to fight, not better laws. Not more laws or tougher laws or better laws, but within the existing laws, actual investigation and actual punishment. So I'll stop here.
Thank you, professors, for the enriching talk. Now we shall move on to the question answer segment. So we'll take 3 questions at one go.
And how, from where the idea comes to save the accused? That recently we saw the news that in article in college, some of the people came and they did lots of protests and they broke lots of things. And on the other side, we also witnessed that in Katua, in Jammu, where 8 years or 7 years old girl raped, and against, after that, victim, sorry, accused, in the favor of accused, some of the people protested to defend him. So from where that idea comes? Is that idea come from the that we are supporter of the ruling party, or it's this idea come from a patriarchal mindset? And my second question goes, I want to ask you, Nima ma'am, that uh, don't you think this the Bollywood movie and our society? And before saying these, before putting my question, I would like to apologize and say extremely sorry from my side to all the women and girls present here. That these some sort of negative words that mal, pataka, bomb. These words when the male or people say they see to the pretty face or whatever they say. Yeah, these things also, I mean, these words also leading to the that kind of violence and abuse for the I mean harmful for the girls and people.
Hmm. So I want to ask, like, the in this recent case of rape in Kolkata, people reaction is like, there are some authoritarian countries, like Islamic countries, who are having death penalties, and why not India is why India does not have such punishment. But this entire association with an authoritarian country, and to try adopt methods of acceptance to adopt those methods, it's not acceptable. And I want to ask, like, what according to you makes them acceptable to think that such kind of punishment is acceptable?
Hello, good evening, Professor. My name is Vinod. I am from CSRD. How big role does gender sensitization have in creating safe spaces, and what are the pragmatic ways for gender sensitization among all, which can really make a difference?
Should we go for this? So, first one was to each of us, next to our for both of us.
Add something to the question as comparing to the democracy and the authoritarianism, if we are looking in the context of the India, if we as we talk about the certainty of the punishment, in the context of the Middle East countries, the certainty of the punishment if someone is found guilty of rape or anything, then he is beheaded or get the penalty of the death. But what about the India? There is a famous proverb कि तारीख पे तारीख लेकिन इंसाफ नहीं मिलता है.
You are saying what?
That's what I'm just adding. Comparative analysis is it because of the democratic form of government and the authoritarian or the monarchy form of government, or there is any other mechanical disturbance in the judiciary. So I want to add the comparative analysis between the democracy and the authoritarianism in this context.
Protect the accused come from. And I think the answer was in your question in a way. You said, is it to protect the ruling party or is it because of patriarchal instincts? So, unfortunately, whichever the ruling party is, so I'm not even saying which party and which state, the fact is that if the accused is from a particular ruling formation, then the people of that formation, including many articulate women, will support that person. And so it is a combination of general power, general sense of this is my side and this is the other side, but also of the deep internalization of patriarchal values. So it's a combination of the two. So I can understand you're saying, I can understand your puzzlement. It's like a puzzled question. But unfortunately, the fact is that, the mob that attacked Azikor and tried to destroy evidence, etc., that was a trained mob. Okay. We have experienced that in jail. It's like a planned attack. So that's a planned attack, and that's different from That's at a political level. But actually, the fact is, and this is something I want to actually talk about also, I'm glad you asked the question. There is an impulse to protect the accused even among your friends. A woman who faces sexual harassment on this campus will not find all her classmates, women classmates supporting her or all the male classmates supporting her. There will be a way in which, so one of the impulses why women don't support women in sexual harassment cases is because of the girl, good woman, bad woman thing, and you want to show I'm not like her. So you want to be on the side of the boys and to be on the winning side, and you don't want to be seen as a troublemaker. So this is something we have to think about, and this actually ties up to the third question. In the next round, please say your names before you ask the question. So in third question, you asked how does gender sensitization help, and I'm going to link up these two. That the kind of feminist future scenario that Arunima outlined is possible on a campus like this. And it is still there to some extent. It is possible if each one of us takes responsibility to speak up, to stand up, and to, we may not get justice from ICC, but to, as a social group, how do you boycott such people? How do you push them to the side? People who are sexual harassers. How do you keep the campus safe? Not through external security, but because as a community you don't permit it, which means you have to be able to, and women have to stand by women. You have to stand up and say, I saw it happen. You don't agree with the kind of narratives that say, oh, they were actually in a relationship, she's just trying to take revenge. This kind of thing one hears all the time. And it's surprising to me, you could have been in a relationship and still when you say no, your no means no. You could have been in a 5-year relationship and you can say no and that no means no. So the fact that someone is in a relationship doesn't mean that anything. So for gender sensitization, which is like a term which I'm not very comfortable with the term gender sensitization because it sounds very governmentalist. It sounds like a governmentality kind of thing. But I know what you mean. How do we use this? So where does the impulse to protect the accused come from? It comes from deeply internalized values, and it comes from trying to side with power. And you have to take a decision like right now, all the new students and the old students, that you will not stand by and watch sexual harassment happen. So how, yes, you should follow official, but then, and by unofficial, I don't mean lynching, I don't mean encounters. I mean, how do you shame someone so that they feel completely isolated? If they're a sexual harasser, they should be completely isolated. They should have no friends. Nobody should sit with them. Nobody should talk with them. If you know for sure that this has happened. So that's, I think, by talking about these issues more and more, and not only when you have a talk, there have to be groups among yourselves where you talk about how do we build a safe campus. This used to be a very safe campus, and it's become less safe now, but it's still a safer campus than many. So you can make that space that Arunima was talking about, where anyone can go out at whatever time and be safe, right? So that was the first and the third. See, the point that you made, it's interesting that you actually made the argument she's saying is a problem. Because it is not true. I mean, how is it assumed that beheading a man for rape means there are no rapes? Do you think women are completely safe in the Eastern countries? No, of course not. They are no more safe than they are in Delhi or in New York. Women are not safe anywhere. So you're just assuming that for one rape a man is beheaded and therefore all women are safe. That's not true. It's not certainly not true for Saudi Arabia, where even to drive a car is forbidden. So that's not. You're just imagining that if there are very severe punishments, women feel safe. Let's go find out how safe women are. I'm not saying they're more unsafe. I'm saying women everywhere are unsafe. And so what ties up here is that the severity of punishment has nowhere ensured the safety of women. Nowhere, never. Death penalty is already here. There is a death penalty for rape in this country. We didn't want it, they gave it to us. Take. Death penalty. What has happened? 90 rapes, as I said, reported per day in 2022. 10 years after, 9 years after that law was passed. So it doesn't, because nobody thinks when they commit a rape that they will be caught. And if they are caught, they know how low the conviction rate is. So they get, and so some of them have political patrons, and they know or they think they will get away. So it's not severity of punishment, but certainty of punishment. That is, there has to be like a time-bound thing. The police have to perform certain acts. If they have not conducted the investigation properly, they have to be just dismissed or suspended. I mean, they have to be suspended at any rate when an inquiry should take place. I shouldn't say dismissed because that's also a very arbitrary act, but they should be suspended and an inquiry should take place. There should be certainty of punishment. So it's not acceptable, in other words, to say that authoritarian countries' women are safe and we should become more authoritarian. Because more authoritarianism inevitably comes down on the least powerful groups in society. A more authoritarian state will be more anti-Dalit, more anti-religious minority, more anti-women. Authoritarianism has never worked to protect you. So that's also.
My name is Hafsa. Actually, I wanted to ask you, just like you said, that death penalty is not an effective thing, and with this very layman, lay human sort of understanding of mine, I mean, how to ensure that if somebody who's been convicted of an offense of, sexual violence or whatever sort of offense, that the person comes out of the imprisonment and he is, or she, or whoever, this person is a changed human being. I mean, like, there was this case in one of the states where a man had raped a minor and then he came out after 7 years of imprisonment and then he raped another minor. So, what sort of punishment should be there? Like, what sort of imprisonment should be there, or what should be happening during their punishment period, that they come out as reformed human beings? And second point would be, second question I wanted to ask was that what happens when we have laws for juveniles, that is, they are there, but then when the human beings, when these people who are convicts and who have done these sort of horrible things, so when they are on that, unlike they are about to be. I mean, they're not juveniles and they are about to be adults, that age where they are on 18, 19, that sort of thing. How they escape from that, from the punishment. So, how to deal with that? Thank you.
I'm Sushmita. Is normalizing sex or physical urges a way to sort of address this, because sex is considered to be very sort of closed doors affair. There is a burden on women to sort of save themselves, and there is a burden of their entire family on girls that don't indulge in anything to bring shame on the family. So I think this is very, very deeply traumatizing, and this sort of conditioning begins at a very young age. So by the time we reach college, I think we are already deeply conditioned and burdened, and we don't want to further perpetuate any additional stress that we can bring on the family. So is normalizing that sort of that it is normal to have these urges, a way to go about it.
I'm Yusra from Triple 2, and before asking any question, I have my own experiences which I've gone through, and apart from my own experiences, wherever I go, even in the bus stop, in bus or in hostel, everywhere I go, I try to meet everyone and ask the same questions regarding how they have faced the violence and whatever the minor cases they have been through. And whosoever I have talked with, I have got, I know until now it is a little experience, but from all of that I have got a question that most of the girls are hesitant to speak for them. I know what the reason would be, but apart from it, unless until it becomes a matter of great what kind of media release or anything which comes in the limelight, the privileged so-called feminists don't come in the protest. They don't want to be a part of that. They give the excuse that there could be a minor space. There must be a
of us, and we should not exclude them. As you were saying that yes, they say that don't exclude them as they need their help financially and for coming as they are in the power, so we need their support. So they think that they haven't been through any kind of violence, so it should not be, it is not their matter. So how could we build the kind of empathy in them that we could have the feminine kind of community? For getting that, I would say it would be a revolution for us, even for intellectual level or any kind of it. So how could we do that?
मैम जैसे आपने कहा कि पनिशमेंट जो है इंश्योर करनी चाहिए इसके लिए
सर नाम बताइए
ताही ताही
बोलिए बोलिए
जैसे आपने बताया कि पनिशमेंट इंश्योर करना चाहिए कल्प्रिट के लिए, तो फिर हम देखते हैं कि पोस्ट पनिशमेंट उनके लिए सेलिब्रेशन होता है, तो इस सिचुएशन में क्या वो और इंकरेज होगा या डिस्करेज होगा, ये तो मतलब एक क्वेश्चन आता है इस पर। दूसरी बात है कि जब हम कोई प्रोटेस्ट करते हैं किसी सेक्सुअल असॉल्ट के खिलाफ, तो क्या उसमें हम किसी रेंज चीजों को देखते हैं? अगर हम देखते हैं कि कोई आदिवासी का रेप हुआ है, तो जिस तरह से आज आरजीकर के हॉस्पिटल के ये हुआ है, कि इस तरह का मतलब नहीं देखते हैं। या फिर जब हम फॉर एग्जांपल अगर मैं ग्लोबल फिनोमेना में देखूं, तो 7 अक्टूबर के बाद जो सेक्सुअल असॉल्ट एलिगेशंस जो आए थे कि इजरायली वीमेन वेयर रेप्ड एंड किल्ड, जो के बाद में रिपोर्टेड हुआ है कि मोस्ट ऑफ देम वर फेक, बट फिर जब हम देखते हैं कि पैलेस्टीनियन वीमेन आर बीइंग रेप्ड विद अ वीडियोग्राफी, बट हम उस तरह के आउटरीच नहीं देखते हैं वेस्ट में, यहाँ तक के ईस्ट में भी। तो क्या हम जो एक रेस या कास्ट या रिलीजियन का लेंस लगाते हैं, तो क्या इससे एक वीमेन के नजरिए से ना देखना, उसके साथ उसकी दूसरे आइडेंटिटी जोड़ देना, एक क्राइम को सिर्फ क्राइम से ना देखना, उसके साथ दूसरे जो आइडेंटिटीज है उस आइडेंटिटी को जोड़ करके देखना कैसा है और उसको कैसे एड्रेस किया जाएगा?
Hello. Ma'am,
so actually Arunima has answered the questions in almost exactly the way I would have. So I'll just pick up one or two themes. One has to do with prison reform, Hafsa's question. And so I want to reiterate that we don't think about what happens inside prisons once people go there. Now in the context of sexual violence, it may seem strange to say this, but the fact is that the large majority of people in prison are Dalits, Adivasis and Muslims. In other words, poor men and women, and very poor women. So it's the most poor, most marginalized men and women in this country or anywhere who end up in prison. And prison is a brutalizing space. Prison is not a space where you learn to become a better human being. Prison is utterly brutal, utterly violent, and you will only come out of that place more violent and more brutal than you were. So in a feminist understanding of rape, it's not enough to stop and send him to prison. We have to have a larger idea of prison reform, of what prisons should do, what is the point of prisons. We should work towards things like that. So we need to keep in mind that prisons is not the end of the story. We have a bigger responsibility than punishing the rapist. If we are feminists, we have huge responsibilities. And those responsibilities have to ask, why are the poorest, most marginal people still in prisons in this country and elsewhere? And what is that space like? So that's one theme that I want to pick up. The other thing I want to pick up, which ran across two questions, Sushmita's and I think you said Tahir, right? Is about rape is not about sex, it's about violence. It's something that it's a formula that we have imbibed since the 1980s. Rape is not about desire. Rape is not about sex. Rape is about establishing dominance. So when you talk about Adivasi, so when you talk about, so what is this kind of mass rape of women in the Palestine situation, in communal violence, in India, large numbers of women are raped, Dalit women are routinely raped to teach the community a lesson. So the women are seen as the repository of the community's honor, and you're punishing the community by raping their women. So it's about power. It is not about sex. It is a mistake to think that rape is about sex. So I agree with Arunima that of course we should normalize safe consensual sex. Of course we should normalize it. But that is not the answer. Your question was, is that the answer? That's not the answer to ending sexual violence, because sexual violence is not coming about because of sexual desire. Sexual violence is about power. And the third theme, I'm going to take your question as about how to build empathy. You asked the question how to build empathy. I also didn't understand what you meant. Privileged feminists don't join protests. Feminists are the ones who organize protests. We have a very, very long history of protest in this country. But you said how to build empathy. And how to build empathy is by talking. Talking, conversing, not finishing this and just going off and now forgetting about it to the next talk, but have reading groups, have discussion groups, talk to one another, ask one another what do we want in a safe campus. Kind of something like a rules of conduct from below, not rules of conduct given to you by the administration, but what will you as a collectivity, as a collective, what are the rules of conduct you want from one another? How should we be with one another? I'm using rules of conduct deliberately because it's used in that very top-down way. But there could be a very bottom-up way of telling one another how should we live with one another, how should we talk to one another. That's how empathy would be built. Maybe we can just take one more round of 4 questions and be done.
Third semester. Ma'am, I want to ask you, ma'am, don't you think that the justice should be delivered proportionately? Like in this case, in this the brutal rape case of Kolkata, we saw that the brutality is raised to that peak. And in this case, if the punishment is quite low, then it will again promote the others to do so. So in both ways, it is like if we don't go for the death penalty, it's okay, ma'am. But if the punishment will be low, then again it will promote the others to do. So don't you think so, ma'am? Is it? And you talked about that it is not a isn't it a psychological action, ma'am? Is it or any other factors behind it? The one who rapes. So, ma'am, this kind of question. That's all.
Hello, ma'am. My name is Garima Singh. Ma'am, my question somewhat pertains to what she has said. Ma'am, last week I read a book, The Last Girl. This book is the autobiography of Nadia Murad. She was a survivor from the Islamic States, and she was treated as a slave, and she was raped, and a number of atrocities was committed against her. What the global community did was giving her a Nobel Prize, but what she said in her speech is that I do not need a prize, I need protection for my community. So when we as ma'am said that when punishment, this rape is more of an exercise of power, so should not the punishment be coercive or as a precedent for people for fear mongering or a kind of fear that they are not going to do it again?
Hello, ma'am. I'm Tana, and I want to ask that the way you said that how as a community, as a society, we should respond to these situations when these happen. So what I noticed is that what you said that social isolation might work in these cases, but it is as difficult doing it in practice when said easily. Because what people, especially in case of men, what is done is it is very easy to separate their personal lives from their professional lives or their academic lives. And people very easily defend their character, like he might be of a slimy character, but he's a good professor, or he's an academician, or he's whatever. And if something is done against him, then oh, his career might be destroyed, we might lose a good scholar and things like that. And moreover, as normal students, as normal community, what I've seen is people don't want to displease anybody for a case that is not directly related to them.
So it is easy to maintain a safe distance. So let's not get involved on the let whoever is involved deal with whatever the disease is going on. And the second thing is that I want to ask it what an effective gender sensitization should look like, because the ones I've been to are like traumatizing. They put all the onus of women on the women only. Be vigilant. Don't run into bad men. Don't go to these places. And what were you doing? And things like that. So
That doesn't sound like gender sensitization.
There were sessions on gender sensitization here that said did this in JNU, organized by ICC. Students' organizations. Keep your
Six sense of.
okay. Okay, we'll just take two last questions. Yeah.
Ma'am, I'm Garima Jain. I'm from CPS. Actually, my question is regarding the fact that are we not looking at gender sensitization the wrong way? And my question comes from the context of school education that we get for like 12 years, and that school education, in my observation, has not been gender sensitized at all, and it is a culture of shaming by a fellow teachers, fellow students, and a culture of acceptance of the fact that there is a good girl, bad girl kind of thinking, and this goes on to perpetuate the mindset that if a girl is a bad in their opinion or whatever, then whatever has been happened to her is justified or something like that, and also the fact that a very large student like number of students don't go for higher education, or even if they go for higher education, it is not in the institute such as JNU or DU. So that they don't get that kind of exposure. So that they don't get the sort of unlearning that happens to students, So in that sense, are we not looking at gender sensitization or from a very university perspective, and not from a perspective where the students actually need to they develop their character and personalities, etc. Thanks.
One last question.
Hello ma'am, I'm Rashida. I just want to ask that it is okay to talk about women, I also do, but if we see false cases, so it goes against feminism, because we do talk about men also, and the thing is it makes weak the true cases where there are really rape, where there are really sexual harassment. But because of such a false cases, it makes like कि ऐसे तो ऐसे ही कर दिया होगा, या फिर ये तो blame कर रही है, या फिर जो भी. So what about what should be the mechanism to ensure there must not be false cases? And the second question, I am confused that should I ask or not. Actually, I searched a lot on Google and websites, but I didn't find what are the laws or the legal provisions here which ensures there must not be sexual harassment or rape with men. So, if you have any ideas, so you can share with us. Thank you.
I think that's two couples. Not 100%.
Hello, ma'am.
Oh my gosh, he had raised his hand and that's it now. Just, they're really tired. So that's it and, okay. Okay, then there's the two of you. That's it. All right.
Yeah. I'm Shivam from CSP, and as you have mentioned, the issue about the labor force participation.
Just move away from the speaker.
The low labor force.
Move away from the speaker. Yeah. That's right.
As you have mentioned, the low labor force participation in India. And my question is, ma'am, I'm very surprised that as our country has a very rich history about the feminism and great philosophy also. So why India has very low labor force participation of about 32 or 33 as compared to Bangladesh? Our neighbors have 47 or 48, and even our third communist China have about 60 to 70% of the labor force participation, ma'am. So my question is, ma'am, how we get out of this low labor force participation, and how we should ensure more and more workforce participation of women in the mainstream. Okay.
And his last.
So that's the last question.
Thing I wanted to say that in this campus itself, that as of now we are discussing over women's safety in campuses and around, but in this campus itself we witnessed a very like sexual harassment thing happened just few months back, and eventually she is my friend and she is running around court and she is like every day I ask her what's going on. She is having like she registered about that and in that resistance she is having fine over her. She is running to court and she is not able to register this semester till now. And like these things are happening. Myself like we were protesting here. I was there for the 8 day hunger strike to ensure GS caps in this campus. Somebody from administration comes and just says that no, ICC is there and it's a government body and it's from government and we can't do anything. So as of now, like ICC is there, but ICC is not able to give ensure safety for the women in this campus. Like right now, like we see that even the ICC is there, but the women are like not safe and they have to go to court to have to find the justice for herself.
Proportionate punishment. The 2012 rapists were hanged. Were they hanged? The 2012 gang rape in Delhi, they were hanged. How did it act as a deterrent? I'm saying this again and again. It happened in 2012. The figures that I have are for 2022, but routinely 100 rapes a day are reported. It does not act as a deterrent. How many times can we say this to you? My point is that you don't know what families want, first of all. Let the family think about what they want. They may want their daughter back. They may not want somebody hanged. But the point is that we don't do what families want. That is not what a society is based on. Families want a lot of things. Families want to keep their daughters at home and never let them go out, right? So when all of you keep saying, for some reason, this myth remains in your mind, this entire 2 hours, we're giving you facts with the actual existence of the death penalty on the statute books, with rapists being hanged. Rape is still happening every single day. So the point is not hard punishment and harsh punishment. It does not stop, it does not act as a deterrent. What about these guys? They knew the other guys were hanged. They think, everyone thinks they can get away. So we have to make sure nobody gets away. There should be a punishment. There would be clear, if there is physical harm, this kind of punishment. If there is sexual violence plus physical harm, that kind of punishment. There would be gradations of punishment. That's what a good law should look like. Not what you are saying is a kind of, and not you, but many of you are saying harsh punishment. It's a kind of very medieval mindset where you think कि हाथ काटो, सर काटो, सब ठीक हो जाएगा. नहीं हो जाएगा ठीक. There will be that kind of violence. So what do we as feminists have to fight for? Certainty of punishment, certainly proportionate punishment. That can be in the law. What is the proportion of punishment? So I think, please stop thinking that death penalty will stop rape, because death penalty has not stopped rape. People have been hanged for rape and people are still doing Garima, you said about the person who said, I need protection, not a prize. Where's the protection, not a prize? Of course, I think that's what anybody would say, that I don't, many people, many activists, disability rights activists, many feminists say, I'm tired of being called brave. I don't want to be brave, I just want to be an ordinary person. But we are forced to be brave in this world. So I agree with her. Tanya, you're right. I think I'll take the first part of what you said actually both of what you said as comments rather than questions. You're right, there is a tendency to say he's a good father and professor, he may be a sexual harasser, but he writes excellent articles. There is an issue here. You can enjoy and learn from his excellent articles, but he should still be punished for sexual harassment. That's what I would say. So I would not say don't read him. Read him if he has something important or interesting to say about international relations or the economy or whatever, but he should be punished for sexual harassment, whether it's a student. And this whole point of men's careers will be ruined if they are punished is something we have to fight, because women who face sexual harassment and sexual violence are deeply traumatized. Their careers are already affected because they are not able to function in the way that they wanted to function. So why is a man's career more important than the trauma that a woman has gone through? And you should have thought about it when you were sexually harassing someone. You should have, and imagine what sort of careers they will have. What sort of IAS officers will they become? What sort of civil servants will they become? What sort of professors will these men become? Who are harassing their classmate, what will they do when the person is their subordinate? So their career should be affected, actually, right? So I mean, that's a, and you're saying that gender sensitization tends to be terrifying. I think there's a razor's edge. There is a way in which authorities tend to say stay home, etc., and place the responsibility on the victim. But I can also imagine, I don't know exactly what situations you're talking about, but I can imagine a students' organization also giving you tips, right? That tips on how to deal with sexual violence. I can imagine that is sort of a plan B. Ideally, we should have a campus where we don't need such tips. But I guess if it's a students' organization, perhaps the intention was also to say we should also be alert. But I do agree with you that that can't be gender sensitized. That is some kind of practical tip, accepting that this is an unsafe campus, which is heartbreaking to hear. Right? It's heartbreaking to hear that JNU is now so unsafe that you're given tips on how to escape sexual violence from strangers. And that is I would not call that gender sensitization in any form. That is about telling women how to protect themselves in an unsafe space. And we may not want to do that. So I think both of your comments are very important. It's not too late in university. Start where you are. When you say something like this, it's like यहाँ से शुरू करने से कोई फायदा नहीं, स्कूल में करना नहीं, जहाँ आप हैं वहाँ कीजिए. 50-60 नहीं, there's no counter thing. We both have other appointments. When you say that it has to be unlearned, I can unlearn now at the age of 64. You think you can't unlearn at the age of 21? Of course, everybody can unlearn at any stage. And let us not do this thing of we should start before. Yes, we should start before, but start where you are. Start where you are with your 55-year-old father, with your 25-year-old brother, with your sisters, with your mother, with your grandmother. Start where you are. Don't think of what could have been done earlier. After you've sorted this out, you can think about schools. I agree with you. There should be this thing in schools. Why is labor force participation low? It does have a lot to do with Shivam. It does, of course, have a lot to do with patriarchy. It does have a lot to do with access. It has to do with unemployment. If there is very high unemployment, the few jobs that are there will be taken by men because men are assumed to be the breadwinners, etc. So, in a situation of general unemployment, workforce participation of women will be low. But for me, the question is not how to raise labor workforce participation of women. The question is how to ensure that women have the capacity and the resources to be independent, to be economically independent, to take their own decisions. So you see what it is when you say labor force participation. That's like thinking of humans in terms of resources. But if you think from the feminist point of view, yes, women should be able to take up work, but if that means that they're going to be, it's just a huge double burden, that's not enough. It's not enough for us to say women should be participating in productive production and not just reproduction. We have to say the whole thing. It's like with prisons. We have to say everything. We have to say end the sexual division of labor, socialization of childcare, socialization of reproductive services. It's a package deal. It's not one thing. Labor force participation is the problem of the state. I'm not concerned with that because that's one of the arguments. Then we'll have more people. Cheaper labor. Higher labor force participation by women ensures cheaper labor because there's a larger labor pool. That can't be our concern as feminists, right? So we have to ask the questions differently. And yes, I don't know what to say to you. The ICC is ineffective. The ICCs in most places are ineffective. There's sexual violence now in JNU at a level at which we have not experienced. We've both been here since the 80s, Arunima and I, and we've known JNU as a campus for decades. And this is a new and terrifying phenomenon, and we have to fight it together. And we can't expect immediate success, and we can't. As you know, this is a microcosm of a uh, much larger political formation which has been authoritarian and anti-minority and anti-women. So we're fighting all that. So it's a fight. There's no easy answer.